how to make wise decisions. The reason I want to talk about this is because last week on the episode on the podcast, I talked about how to find a mentor. And so this is kind of like how to help yourself make your own decisions if you don't have a mentor, or how to think about it even if you do. But I was just as a side note, as I was writing out the notes to this episode, um, I was realizing God and I kind of play a little game together. I guess at the answer, I write down my notes, and then I go and look and see what the scripture says about it. And a lot of you might think maybe that's a backwards way of doing it. I didn't even realize that I did this until I did it, until I did it today. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I do this all the time. I'm like, what are my thoughts on this topic? And the reason I do that is not to say that I think that my thoughts are so amazing or, you know, above the Bibles or anything like that. Oh my goodness. No, but to see what's already in there, maybe what I've already learned and received. And so I just kind of put out there, what I think. And then as I'm writing, I'm prompted by a verse. And so then I go to that verse. I'm going to show you where it is in these notes. I go to that verse, and because I've already been thinking about the topic, when I look at it and I say, well, and what's the context of this verse? What is this talking about? So many times I learn something new, something that I've never seen before, even though I've read that passage so many times that I haven't memorized. So when we get to that point, I am going to show you what I am talking about. But I just realized, oh, look, we have a little game going on. Let's see. It's almost like April is the student, God the Father is my teacher. And I'm like, let me see if I can get the answer right. Let me see. And so I kind of raise my hand and say, is it this? And God, through his word, shows me yes or no. And also, did you even notice this? Have you ever taken this into consideration? And so it's fun. I think that for a lot of years of my own Christian walk, I used to have a very let's make sure we get it right, and let's not do or say anything that brings dishonor to God's name. And it made me very uptight. And I'm realizing I really think that this is all off topic. Don't you guys love this? Um, I am really realizing, I think, that mature Christianity looks a bit more like childlike faith as we go along. So it's almost like we started childlike faith and then we end in having this awe and appreciation of the magicalness of life. All right, like a kid again, except that we know so much more and we can appreciate it on such a different level. Okay, so how to make wise decisions. Which one should I choose? Now, I get this question a lot. In fact, I help a lot of people with this question because I am a clarity and relationship coach. And so many times I'll give out a free clarity call. And so somebody will come to me and I will walk through this process with them. And so it kind of broke down my own process a little bit. And I was thinking, why is it that sometimes I can help them get to clarity? Many times I can help them have greater clarity and make a decision on something that they may have been waffling on for weeks or months or even years. And how can we get that much clarity in just one session? And so as I was thinking through that, now part of it is outside perspective. Okay. I am purposely coming to these conversations with pretending like I know nothing. And I also have the added benefit of I am completely neutral in your life. Whatever you're asking me, I don't have a dog in the race. I don't care. I don't care if you marry that guy or don't marry that guy. I'm not emotionally involved in that decision. So that helps me maintain my perspective, which is one of the things that you want to remember when you're talking to other people trying to get advice is, do they have perspective? Do they have neutral perspective? And can they maintain neutral perspective? Um, I'm reminded about that time when in the Old Testament where King Solomon is being tested on his wisdom, basically. Young king, probably a teenager. And these two harlots come to him and they're saying they're both claiming the same baby because apparently one woman accidentally smothered her baby in her sleep and then stole the baby from the other woman. Two women claiming the same baby. There are no DNA tests. And King Solomon was the court of last resort. He has to make the decision. And um, and so he made the decision by having neutral perspective. Very dispassionately, without passion, he says, "Bring me a sword. We're going to cut the baby in half." The true mom cries out and says, "No, give it to her. Give the baby to the other woman." And the other woman says, "Nope, that sounds fair. Cut it in half. We'll both have half of a baby." And that is the benefit of neutral perspective, is that he can say something outrageous to trigger the truth. And because it was very, very obvious after that point who really cared about the baby and who really didn't. So, but we're talking about wise decisions in your life. Okay. So that's one of the things that we're trying to get to is perspective. So here are the mistakes that we make that make it harder to make a wise decision. Number one, thinking there's a right decision. I'm going to share two more mistakes after this, but I want to break down each mistake individually. Number one, thinking there's a right decision. So when we think there is a right decision, then it introduces the fear of getting it wrong. Oh no, which one should I choose? But when we think that there's a right decision, what we're really thinking is one is going to lead me to a wonderful life and one is going to prevent me from having a wonderful life. It puts pressure on the decision-making process. And I want you to consider that if there was an obviously right and wrong decision, then it wouldn't even feel like a decision. You would just have already made it. It's like, should I go right or left? Well, one's going to lead me to my destination. One's not going to lead me to my destination. Well, what you should do is not just choose randomly. You should consider the third option, consult a map. Or you can choose if you're not in a hurry and you can just drive down one and see what you find. And you can also consider that all roads lead to Rome and right or left will get you there. One will just take longer. So when we think that there's a right decision, then it's like we freeze or we get pressure to make the decision. And then it makes it harder to make the decision. So the whole point of thinking that letting go of this, concentrating on there's a right decision is so that it makes it easier to make a decision. Okay. I didn't say how to make the wisest decision possible in the title of this episode on purpose, because the wisest decision possible would say that there's one right pinnacle decision. When most times in life, there are pros and cons to every choice that we make. Okay. So let go of there's a right decision. Let go of the pressure of thinking there's a right decision. Okay. Mistake number two is we take too many people's opinions into the decision-making process. We're trying to consider too many people's opinions, too many people's perspectives. Okay. I know this is the problem all the time. As soon as somebody says to me, I say, why haven't you made a decision? Well, it's complicated. And I'm like, I'm going to bet it's complicated because you're trying to take too many people's feelings into consideration on this decision. And sure, and almost always, it's complicated means It feels complicated. Not that it is complicated. It feels complicated because we're trying to take too many people's feelings into consideration. So consider that the decision is not complicated. Managing other people's feelings are super complicated. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I came across this, I came up against this myself when we were trying, we being my husband and I, because that's the only two people involved in that decision who can truly make that decision. We're deciding, do we want to stay in Missouri and continue the business that he had started there and had run for 15 years, I think? Or do we want to move to Florida and um, start a new business? And it felt super complicated. Why did it feel super complicated? Because I knew how very much both sides of our family would love for us to stay in Missouri because they're both there. And that's makes it harder to make the decision. So I want you to be aware of that. And one of the ways that I help people deal with that is by let's just put that aside for a second. We're not ignoring that. We're just recognizing that it is something that you are taking into consideration in this factor. And what happens when we remove that consideration? What do we learn next? Oh, that's fun to set that one aside. It sometimes takes heavy lifting on their part to do it. Okay. And mistake number three that we make in and what makes it harder to make wise decisions is this. We are ignoring ourselves in this equation. We're either ignoring our own personality, our values, our priorities, but somehow we're ignoring ourself. And there's a difference. So I'm thinking now, like let's say you had an option between two different jobs that you want to take. Okay. And you're not certain. One of the reasons you might not be certain, one of the reasons why it might seem complicated is because you think there's a right answer, one job is better than the other. And also, there are reasons you don't like that option. Because it's when one job is superior to the other and we like those options, it's almost not even a question, unless, mistake number two, other people's opinions. So, what's going on? I remember one time I was talking to a woman and she said she had been a nurse for like 15 or 20 years and she had went and got a master's degree. And because she had just gotten that master's degree, they were offering her a promotion to HR, to human resources management. And she was not taking into consideration what the aspects of the two jobs would mean because she was just considering, I got this job and this is I got this education and now this is a promotion. And one of the things that you want to take into consideration is, will you be happy with that job, considering that you're so happy at the job you're at? As in her personality, she loved working with people, helping ease people's suffering. She was a born nurse. And when she goes to HR, one of the things you're going to want to take into consideration, she was going to want to take into consideration was there's going to be a lot of administrative tasks. Will your personality be okay with that? Will you be okay with doing this kind of work day in, day out? You're letting go of a work that you know you enjoy for a work of a very different kind. And different personalities like different things. I know this because in my mind, I'm like, give me those kind of tasks any day over patiently sitting there with a patient and, you know, relieving their suffering or, easing their suffering. I'm not cut out to be a nurse. In fact, I've I have a weak stomach. Let's just be honest. But admin tasks works really good with my efficiency brain. You can just see me like filing things and doing things and deciding things. And so you want to take yourself into consideration on this. Do not ignore it. And do not think that you're being frivolous for having done so. There is a difference in the way that you were created and the skills you might need to develop. And we sometimes think, well, it's just a skills thing. Well, it might be the way you were created, introvert versus extrovert, or really gifted with working with people versus really efficient at organizing. And that's not to say that we can't develop skills to aid us in that, but considering the bulk of the work, are you working against either your personality or your values or your priorities? Another example is this. I would never take a high pressure 80-hour a week career. Never choose one. I'm imagining corporate lawyers, for example, because number one, 80 hours a week. No, I want to spend the bulk of my time with my family and studying and coaching and basically doing what I'm doing right now. I don't have that drive. I don't desire that drive. Secondly, I don't enjoy the adrenaline-paced life. Some people do. I get sick from too much adrenaline. Typically, I lose my voice. So don't ignore yourself in this equation. Make sure you're aware of your personality, your values, your priorities. And that is a big but valuable subject matter to study, yourself. I was trying to think how I wanted to say that. When you really understand the way you were created, the values you hold for a reason, the priorities you have, and the reason you have them, number one, you'll kind of notice that they were placed in you. You almost didn't choose them. Number two, when you're confident in them, making decisions becomes such an easier process because you know who you are and who you were created to be, and you know whose you are. So the three mistakes we make is thinking there's a right decision because that puts pressure on choosing just one. Two, we try to take too many people's opinions into perspective. And three, we're ignoring ourselves, the way we were created in that perspective or in that decision. So what is the solution? How to make wise decisions? The general broad solution is, and it works every time, you're going to want to come from faith, not fear. You're going to want to ask questions. You're going to want to pay attention. Are my answers coming from fear or are they coming from faith? It's a feeling. So fear comes from a thought. I don't want to miss out. I don't want to get this wrong. What if this doesn't work? What if it turns out horribly? Those are the questions that we're asking when we're kind of in the fear. But faith, and they both feel kind of like, oh, a little bit buzzy. But the difference between fear and faith, fear is really a negative. It'll stop you in your tracks. Or, oh my goodness, I'm pointing at you guys because I just realized this. It'll either stop you in your tracks or it will hurry you to making a hasty decision. And because you made a hasty decision, oh my goodness, my Siri is my Siri is yelling at me. All right. It will. The reason you don't want to use fear is because either one, it'll get you stuck not making a decision, or two, it will hurry you towards making a hurried decision. And the decision will be made not for the better reasons, the best reasons. They'll be made from fear reasons, not from faith reasons. They'll be made from past reasons, not future reasons. They'll be made from the place of, I want to avoid this pain. I want to not get it wrong. I want to avoid pain instead of, no, this is what I want to go after in my life. So you want to be aware of this feeling when you're trying to make your decision. You want to come from faith. Now, faith is kind of like nervous anticipation. Like, I have considered my options and they sound a little bit like they're big, maybe bigger than I can handle. I'm going to need God's help in it. But I'm kind of excited and I'm kind of realizing, yeah, this is going to be not a cake in the walk, or it might lead to peace. Sometimes the right decision, excuse me, did you catch me? Did you hear what I just said? I just said the right decision. When you make a decision, sometimes you feel peace, like, oh, I've made a decision. Let's move forward. But sometimes your peace, it doesn't feel like peace. It feels like faith, like, ooh, what's coming up next because of this decision? All right. So, solution, come from faith, not fear. So, be aware of the fear. Ask, start with curiosity. What if there's no wrong? What if you can make either option work? What if you can be happy either way? So I'm thinking right now of maybe somebody who's just trying to decide, do I want to say, yes, I want to marry this guy, or no, I want to marry this guy. I don't want to marry this guy. Okay. What are the reasons that you want to say yes? Well, all of these wonderful things. You know, I do like this about him. I do like this about him. I do like this about him. What's the reason why you're not sure? If you love all these things about him, what's the reason you're not sure? I'm afraid it won't work out. Is what I hear all over and over again. Okay. Is there any reasons behind that? Any real good reasons behind, I'm afraid it won't work out? Well, sometimes there's the reason of, I've seen a lot of divorce and a lot of marriages don't work out. Okay. That's fear versus faith of, I can make this work. But there might be well, I've been ignoring this and I haven't wanted to talk about, the fact that I'm not comfortable with this aspect of him. He's got a temper and he doesn't seem to know how to control it. Or he struggles with this, or it feels like he's holding something back on me. And there's a certain thing or there's a certain topic that we're dancing around that we haven't discussed. Right. So just discussing it, you find out, okay, what's the next step we need to take? Facing your fears. But sometimes we kind of know the answer is no, I do not want to marry this guy. But also, I do want to marry this guy because what if there's not another one out there? See how fear can push us into making a hasty decision. Whereas when we just set it aside and we keep on exploring, it becomes way more clear because we've talked out all the things that we're afraid of. Okay. So what if there's no wrong? What if you can make either option work? Talk out all the fears that come up. Now, this is where Christians usually say to me, well, I just want to make certain I'm doing God's will. And that sounds beautiful. That sounds like something that we all want to do. And it's coming from fear. Okay. So hang with me for a second. My answer to that is this. Why would you think that God makes his will hard to know? Why is God making this hard to know? Sit with that question for a second. Because the Bible says this. 2 Timothy 1:7. For God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. This is that verse that I was talking about earlier. So I had already kind of guessed we cannot come from fear to make wise decisions, but why? And then I was like, oh, am I pulling this out of context? But if you look at the context, why did Paul say this to Timothy? For God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind. He was talking in the context of Timothy, I want you to stir up the gift that was given to you by the laying of hands. As in Timothy, I want you to go forward with what you've been called to do. And Timothy's hesitating. And it's, like, maybe what should I do next with it? What should I do? And that's what I'm talking about. We have to take all of us into consideration. So Paul is saying, don't ignore your personality in this, okay? Don't ignore your gift, your calling, your values, your priorities. Don't ignore you. Stir up the gift that's in you. Stir you up. And God's not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind. We are not going to make wise decisions out of a fear mindset. We're just not going to do it. Now, we might make a decision and then make it work out, and then maybe it becomes wiser. Maybe we gain wisdom along the way of making it work out. But we can't judge what's wise and unwise from fear. Okay. We have to use power. We have to use love. We have to use a sound mind. So, power. Hey, I have the power. I can make either option work. I can make all these options work. We're not trying to pick the option that is going to be right so that then, we have the guarantee that God's going to work it out on the backside on us. That's a lot of times that's what we're trying to do. I want to make sure I have the right decision. So I want to make sure that I have God's blessing on it so that, I can relax and know that it's all going to work out. See, that doesn't work. Love. We make the decision out of love. So I can make either option work. And love, this is what I love to do. I'm checking my motivation here. What's my motivation? I would love to see this outcome. And then sound mind. And that's kind of the process that I've just been talking you through. Self-controlled, sober, think it through, choose, trust. Okay, go through the process. Okay, so how to make a wise decision. As a recap, avoid the 3 mistakes of thinking that there's a right decision, of taking too many people's opinions into perspective and feeling confused, and of ignoring ourselves in the equation, and come from faith, not fear. What if it does? What if either one works out? What if I can make either one work? Which one would I like? Which one would I like to grow in? Which one feels like it's calling me faith? It's calling more from me than maybe what I'm prepared. Which one feels like it's aligned with the way that I was created in the most positive way? And think through it soberly. Exercise your gifts. Okay. Gain perspective. The wonderful thing about needing to make a decision is that we grow in the process of wrestling with the decision and then we make it. Okay. But it's a growing process. Just making the decision. Don't check your brain at the door. Don't allow somebody else to make the decision for you. Do take the opportunity to find somebody else to talk it through and pay attention or talk it through, as you're writing it out. But do pay attention which one feels more like faith versus more like fear. All right. I hope this has helped, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.